as thou wilt.
I'm sorry. I apologize, Rob. I was trying to grab it real quick and it just hit.
God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Thank you, Rob. All right, we are on page 162. We were right at the very bottom of the page. Let's go ahead and come up one paragraph. And we'll do it at someday we hope that every alcoholic, if that makes sense.
You got it. Page 162, everybody. Someday we hope that every alcoholic who journeys will find a fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at his destination. To some extent, this is already true. Some of us are salesmen and go about. Little clusters of twos and threes and fives of us have sprung up in other communities, through contact with our two larger centers. Those of us who travel drop in as often as we can. This practice enables us to lend a hand at the same time, avoiding certain alluring distractions on the road, about which any traveling man can inform you. Asterisk. Written in 1939. In 2019, there are about 120,300 groups. There is AA activity in approximately 180 countries with an estimated membership of over 2 million.
Yeah, so I think the twos and threes have become 20s and 30s in some cases. It's nice. I've done this myself. I don't know if you others have done it, but I've traveled and looked for an AA meeting and actually attended. I think there was a little bit of surprise on people as I walked into the meeting. I remember that they were a little intrigued by the fact that I was traveling and then was at their meeting, which was great. They welcomed me just fine and everything, but there are meetings out there. There's a lot of people that do this where they travel and actually attend a meeting. So with the traveling salesman, there's plenty of opportunity for people that do travel, either business or pleasure, and to find meetings. In addition to that, I think that they're also making inference here to practice enables us to lend a hand at the same time avoiding certain alluring distractions of the road, meaning that once you get out of sight, out of mind, maybe you could go and drink, which obviously that's not the case. That you don't want to. If you have the temptation, then it's easy enough to pick up a book or look on the internet and find a local meeting to go to, and by going to the meeting, obviously helping to suppress the urge and move on. So, Rob?
Yeah, when I read that, what I think about is Bill Wilson when he was in the hotel, the Mayflower Hotel in Akron. You could go to the bar and have a couple of ginger ale or maybe 3 drinks and find some companionship. That'll put it through. These some of the luring, things that happen on the road. But no, what did he do? He chose the telephone booth and to find another alcoholic. That's what we need to do. Find another alcoholic that we can work with. Bottom of page 162. Thus we grow, and so can you. Though you be but one man with this book in your hand, we believe and hope it contains all you will need to begin. We know what you were thinking. You were saying to yourself, I'm jittery and alone. I couldn't do that. But you can. You forget that you have just now tapped a source of power much greater than yourself. To duplicate with such backing what we have accomplished is only a matter of willingness, patience, and labor.
Absolutely. And as you grow into this program and as being a part of AA and recovery, the book itself is all you need to get started with yourself as well as with another person. That's the nice thing about this book is that it's very instructive in a very coaching kind of way, gives you everything that you need to actually sit down with a newcomer and get started. I know that it's a little bit nervous the first time you've maybe sponsor somebody. What I encourage you to do is maybe just help somebody to begin with, maybe not necessarily jump right in and being a sponsor, but basically helping them to find the different chapters in the book based on their questions that they have, get them started with the book, and maybe with some worksheets or something like that that you could actually provide them so that they could begin to actually engage the book and answer some questions as they go along. It might be a nice segue into sponsoring instead of just jumping in and saying, "Hey, I'm going to be your sponsor, and this is my first time." Um, the but remember, and this is what's important here, and I've highlighted this, is that you have just now tapped a source of power much greater than yourself. So remember that you can rely on that and tune into that and use that power to help you kind of move along. Rob?
Yeah, that's why I always, I've got a couple notes on this page right here. And one is this book contains everything you need to get sober and to help others get sober. And, whenever somebody says, well, I can't sponsor people or I can't do a book study, I always take them to this page because we all feel this way when we first start out. I'm jittery, and alone. I couldn't do that, but you can. You forgot that you have just now tapped into a source of power much greater than yourself. To duplicate with such backing, what we have accomplished is only a matter of willingness, patience, and labor. Do not be discouraged or overwhelmed. Okay, we have God on our side now. Okay, and when you feel that way, ask God for help and guidance. Okay, because when you're not sure, remember that's what we have now. We have God on our side, and whenever we feel that we can't do something, ask God to give you the strength to be able to do it. Page 163, everybody. We know of an A member who was living in a large community. He had lived there but a few weeks when he found that the place probably contained more alcoholics per square mile than any city in the country. This was only a few days ago at this writing, 1939. The authorities were much concerned. He got in touch with a prominent psychiatrist who had undertaken certain responsibility for the mental health of the community. The doctor proved to be able and exceedingly anxious to adopt any workable method of handling the situation. So he inquired, what did our friend have on the ball?
Well, so I think what we're talking about here, Rob, is Hank Parkhurst and living in Montclair, New Jersey. We're not sure.
We're not sure. There was talk about that, but then when you get a little further into it, they say that Hank moved there a lot earlier than that.
Oh,
So
we're not sure, huh? Okay. And
we'll go with somebody like Hank Parkhurst, anyways.
somebody like Hank Parkhurst, it is, are we talking about Montclair, New Jersey?
No.
No? Okay. Before I put anything out there, I think what is important to note here is that somebody that kind of gets to a new community back in 1939, obviously moving to a new community meant that you were starting from scratch, which, by the way, you weren't really starting from scratch because you had the book and you had this new found power to move forward. But anytime you do move to a new community, there are nowadays are multiple places with meetings and multiple times of the day, every day of the week, every hour of the day, you can find some kind of a meeting, whether that be in person or online and local to where you are. The other thing that I think is important here is that back in those days, I think that you could approach a doctor, a psychiatrist, something like that, and actually tell them what you are trying to accomplish and ask for uh, suggestions of people, and they would be probably more willing than they are today to do that. So it's probably not an easy thing at all, if near impossible to do today, where you would be able to do what they were doing back in the late 1930s, early 1940s. But I think that there are a number of doctors out there that are probably more than willing to suggest the AA program to their patients, and so obviously AA is much better known today. Rob?
Yeah, Leo, the reason I say they don't think it's Hank Parker, and I'll read this short blurb. This goes on for a long period of time and has an awful lot of information about, like Hank Parker's move to Montclair in 1937. And that's why they say when this book was written, etc. Anyway, perhaps the best candidate for this former alcoholic is Bill Rudell, who moved from Hackensack, New Jersey, sometime in late 1938 and was actively trying to work with others in that new locale. If that is true, perhaps this is a clue to how the initial contact was made with the famous Dr. Howard, whose identity will be discussed in some detail later. And this, I got that information from writing the big book, The Creation of AA. And also Jim Worley had it on his history only. You know what? This is history information. We're going with the information in the big book, and that's what we're trying to do, is just stay sober. We love the history stuff. We love bringing it in, but everybody's got different sayings on who it is, et cetera, et cetera. The most important thing is that we stay sober, and that's really what it comes down to. Our friend proceeded to tell him, and with such good effect, that the doctor agreed to a test among his patients and certain other alcoholics from a clinic which he attends. Arrangements were also made with the chief psychiatrist of a large public hospital to select still others from the stream of misery which flows through that institution.
So we're working on having some, well, it's a process for the program. And back in those days, trying to actually go out and actively find alcoholics. It's not unlike today. There are certain ones of us that have recovered that do, in fact, actively go out and search for alcoholics to sponsor and to get started on the program. It doesn't. There's others that contribute to the program in other ways, but nonetheless, there's a process here, especially for some of the meetings where a newcomer comes in and 1, 2, or 3 people offer up their assistance and gets them started. Again, we're talking about the late 1930s, and in that regard, there is probably more openness to actually go to a doctor and ask them for assistance, and they turn around and provide that assistance. Probably not much today, other than the fact that some of the recovery programs and stuff are probably open to having people as guest speakers come in and talk. They usually have their own program kind of going. Sometimes they adopt AA's program of recovery, and sometimes they don't. But nonetheless, it is an opportunity. So just have to kind of adjust the approach today for someone who is actually actively looking to help another alcoholic. This is but one way, and probably not as big today as it was back then. Rob?
Okay. And our friend proceeded to tell him, and with such good effect, that the doctor agreed to a test among his patients and certain other alcoholics from a clinic which he attends. Arrangements were also made with the chief psychiatrist of a large public hospital to select still others from the stream of misery which flows through that institution. Some of our fellow worker will soon have friends galore. Some of them may sink and perhaps never get up. But if our experience is our criterion, more than half of those approached will become fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. When a few men in the city have found themselves and have discovered the joy of helping others to face life again, there will be no stopping until everyone in that town has had his opportunity to recover, if he can and will.
Yeah, I think the important note here is that once you get started, there's it starts to kind of grow exponentially. So one person reaches three, and then those three people each reach three people, which becomes nine, and then those nine people reach three people, which becomes 27, so on and so forth, and it just kind of grows exponentially. We are at the point now where I don't think we actually reach every alcoholic out there. There are a number of them that either one are not willing and or ready to stop drinking. There's others that just are not aware of the program, and then there's still others that come into the program and somehow get lost. So it's unfortunate, but we do have some that slip through the cracks even when they do come into AA. The important thing here is that uh, you try with as many people as you can that are looking for the help. You sift through the ones that actually want the help, and then you really focus on them. And of those, about 50% are going to recover, based on what AA has anecdotally said. Rob?
Yeah, I'm sorry, just got to let in Amy B. He just woke up. Still, you may say, but I will not have the benefit of contact with you write this book. You cannot be sure. God will determine that, so you must remember that your real reliance is always upon Him. He will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. And asterisk, Alcoholics Anonymous will be glad to hear from you. Their address, P.O. Box, Grand Central Station, New York, New York.
Yep. And the idea here is sure, Bill and Bob are no longer with us. Those that help start AA are no longer with us, and we've been able to pick up the mantle, if you will, and run with it. So I think that this is important for somebody to remember, that the first portion of this book is a very powerful tool to have, notwithstanding the power that you've also found. And doing so, you should be able to do just fine without the founders of this book. And we certainly have proven that time and time again. Rob?
Yeah, but I will not have the benefit of contact with you who write this book. Yeah, we don't have contact with them. That this book was written a long time ago. All these people have passed on, but we can all pass our lineage back to them. And the whole idea is that you know we are taking our experience, strength, and hope, and what we have learned from the program that Alcoholics Anonymous found in this book. You know, they always say you cannot transmit what you do not have. So if we've gone through the steps thoroughly and honestly, then we can take others through it. Remember, Ebby did not wait a year until he was sober to carry the message to Bill. Okay, he was approximately 2 months sober, 72 days, I've heard exactly. I don't know how true that is, but the idea is that somebody with 2 days sobriety can help somebody that's just starting today. Why? How did you do it? I'm having a hard time. Take it one day at a time. Rest, relax. We can help people. How can we help them? It's as simple as showing people when they come to a meeting where the coffee is, pouring a coffee for them, or showing them where the washroom is. So many things we can do to help other people. It doesn't have to be a massive thing. It's simple. We start with simple things. Here's the coffee. Here's where the washroom is. Here's a seat beside me. Come on and sit with me. This is my sponsor. Why, just so you can meet up. You know, introduce them around. Make them feel comfortable. So it's simple, but too many times new people walk into a meeting and nobody greets them. They're left alone. And that's sad. When I came to my first meeting, I got hugs from people that I had no idea. And I'll be honest with you, it was uncomfortable at the beginning. because I didn't feel like I deserved it. I didn't, ooh, geez, get away from me. But you know what? These people just wanted to make sure that I felt comfortable and that I was wanted. And I didn't feel loved and I didn't feel wanted at that period of time in my life. So thank you to those people that went out of their way to greet me. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask Him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. Answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously, you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with Him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us.
Now, this paragraph is interesting. The first couple of sentences here, a lot of people come back and actually quote that. It's not so much that they know a little, they know quite a bit because they've obviously written the first portion of this book, which has got a lot of information in it for recovery. But what they're talking about here is as much as anything is as God constantly discloses more to you and to us, ask Him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. Obviously, you don't know what tomorrow brings, and those answers are going to come. And as the days go by, more and more information comes in, and so that's kind of what I interpret these that they mean is that right now, you don't know what the next 30 days, 3 months, 3 years, et cetera, is going to bring, but you've got a lot to discover in that time. And tapping into your higher power and being right with that higher power, which is important, um, and it will keep you on the straight and narrow, and also give you the guidance that you need in order to work with other people. And that's been proven time and time again. Rob?
I love this line: God will constantly disclose to you more to you and to us. And how many times have we read something in the big book and went, I never noticed that before? Or the way you just said it has opened my eyes to something. Or the analogy that Bill or Professor Art, they said something in a way that you go, oh, no matter how many times you've gone through the book, and I'm sure Bill can attest to this, that sometimes something comes out that means something at that moment that we never realized before, that we never saw it in a certain way before. Or as I love the old timers, or I shouldn't call them old timers, long timers. They say, when did they put that in the book? Is that new? You know, because it just goes to show that, what, there are times where things come out to us. It just, oh, okay. Ah. And that happens constantly, you know. So, always be open to new ideas, you know, throw away your old prejudice and listen. A lot of times we read the set aside prayer because we sometimes close our mind. This is the way it is. That's the only way it is. But somebody will come up with arguments, and instead of arguing, listen, listen to what they have to say. It might be something new. It might open your eyes to something else. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of, of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.
Absolutely. A great way to kind of close out the first portion of this book here is giving yourself over to the power of your higher power, and admitting honestly and openly your faults to your higher power, and then taking what you gain from tapping into that power to giving it to others and helping them find their own higher power. It will be as rewarding as anything that you've ever done. It certainly does help when you've been able to help another person get sober and recover. It's a great feeling for both of the the person you're helping and yourself. So with that, Rob?
You know what, Leo, there's not much more, it will take work to carry this message, to stay sober, helping others, carry this message. And always ask yourself, what can I do for others? We talk about the beginning of, the 12 steps. When we go back, working with others. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. Life will take on new meaning to watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. Well, you know what? It is. Because when we get together and we get to sit in these squares and get to see Dan from the UK, Therese, it's so great to see these people. Amy VP, get to see everybody. Just get to say hello, to make sure everybody is okay. Not everything in life goes swimmingly. We all have problems. People die, people get sick in our lives, but we have a way to deal with it. We have been given spiritual tools that we can deal with. Yeah, it's tough at times to remember to go to those tools. But we sit around and we talk to each other. We get to know each other. Have you prayed about it? Let me pray for you. It, life isn't always a bed of roses. There's a lot of thorns sometimes. But we now have tools to deal with them. Instead of picking up the bottle, now we get down on our knees, we pray to God, and we ask Him to help us get through it and to help our loved ones get through it. Thanks for listening.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Rob. And that concludes the first portion of the book. Some people go ahead and start back over, but what we're going to do today is turn things over to our friend from New Jersey, Bill S. And he is going to take us through Dr. Bob's nightmare, which I think is just as important as Bill's story. And we'll take it from there. But we'll get through a portion of it today, and we'll have Bill S. Take us through it. Bill?
Hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Thanks a lot, guys. This is a good part of the book that you went through, and the only thing I'll add is when you go through the steps, you get spiritually connected to God, and when you take others through the steps, that's what keeps you spiritually connected. And I think that's the point Bill's trying to get across here with this last page that he put in here. So that basically, we're supposed to try to help others, and by trying to help others, that helps us. And that's what this book talks about more than anything else. Let's go to Dr. Bob's nightmare. Okay, Dr. Bob was the co-founder of AA, so obviously he's a very important person. And they put his story in here, and his story is the first story in the story section because he was the first guy that Bill was able to help get sober. So it's kind of like in chronological order. So Bill would have been the first guy, and his story is in the first portion of the book. And Dr. Bob would be the second guy. So his story is the first story in the story section. Originally, before the book was printed, Bill had his story in the back of the book also. His story was first, Dr. Bob's was second. And the editors, when they edited it, Tom Ousel, who they hired to edit the book, he put Bill's story in the front because he thought you needed to first show a problem with an alcoholic before you could have a solution. Because if you have a solution without a problem, nobody knows what the problem is, what the solution to the problem is, because they don't know the problem. So he moved the story to the front of the book, and this is where Dr. Bob's story wound up and Bill's wound up in the front. All right, let's go through this here, the doctor's nightmare, and then we'll see what it says here. All right, the the first paragraph in it is in italics. That means it's important. Right? As co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, the birth of our society dates from the first day of permanent sobriety, June 10th, 1935. So what AA does, AA uses the first day that they had two people with permanent sobriety as the birthday of AA. And they've got the date here as June 10th, 1935. And that's the date that we'll go along with and we'll use. That's what the book says. But today there's people that have supposedly done research on this, and they found out that when Dr. Bob went to this convention in Atlantic City, that the convention actually started on June 10th. So Dr. Bob could not have come back and got sober on June 10th. So they believe it was actually the next week, June 17th. But well, we could go back and forth with that, and different people have different theories on it. But the book says June 10th, and to me, it doesn't matter if he got sober on the 10th or the 17th. What's important is this guy and Bill Wilson got sober before me. So when I needed it, this program was here for me to use. So it doesn't matter what the date was. Okay, till 1950, the year of his death, he carried the AA message to more than 5,000 alcoholic men and women. And to all these, he gave his medical services without charge. So according to this, Dr. Bob carried the message to 5,000 alcoholics. And that's really not unusual because remember, he was a doctor and he was working in a hospital. So he could have dealt with people who were hospitalized for alcoholism or for the results of alcoholism. So it's very possible that he dealt with 5,000 people. Now, being a doctor, he probably saw 2 or 3 patients a day in a hospital. And if you do the math on it, 5,000 alcoholics, Dr. Bob was sober for 15 years. It comes out to approximately 1 a day. So it's very possible that Dr. Bob saw 1 or 2 people in the hospital that were alcoholics every day that he was there hanging out in the hospital, you know, doing his job, his practicing his medical profession. So 5,000 is not really an out of the ballpark figure. It does make sense for somebody that was a doctor working in a hospital. In this prodigy of service, he was well assisted by Sister Ignatia at St. Thomas Hospital in Akron, Ohio, one of the greatest friends our fellowship has ever known. So he not only worked in the city hospital in Akron, he was also doing volunteer work in St. Thomas Hospital. And so he was working with this nun, Sister Ignatia, and she used to put people in the hospital that were alcoholics. And at the time, they really didn't take alcoholics in, so she used to sneak them in. She used to hide them in what they call the flower room, the room in the hospital where they kept all the flowers and that kind of stuff. And she would stick them in there until she could get a bed to put them in or whatever. And Dr. Bob used to go in and help her also working with these alcoholics. So again, Dr. Bob worked in more than one hospital with alcoholics. So obviously he could have dealt with 5,000 people. That's really not an unusual number. So for somebody who would be a doctor working in a hospital. And one thing I like to point out where it says that AA uses the first day of permanent sobriety as AA's birthday, that's the way AA counts counts time. A lot of people have trouble counting their sobriety date. They're not sure when it is. Dr. Bob had 1 bottle of beer on that morning, June 10th, because he was supposed to go do surgery and he was still shaking. So within an hour or so, that beer would have been out of his system. So even though he had 1 drink on June 10th, they consider that the day that he was sober, because within approximately an hour after he drank that, it would have been out of his system and he would have been sober. So a lot of people have trouble trying to figure out when they're supposed to get sober. Is my sober date the last day I drank or the first day I didn't drink? Or some people even wait 3 days after their last drink because they think it takes 3 days for all the alcohol to get out of your system. AA says the first day that you were sober. Whether you had a drink that morning or not, that's when AA counts the time from. And that's what most people in AA, at least in my area, do. That's how they count their time. Now, of course, you got to use a little bit of common sense with that. I mean, if it was 11:30 at night and you had 3 or 4 drinks, they're not going to be out, and then you stop, they're not going to be out of your system before 12 midnight. They'll still be in, so you would have to use the next day. But I would discuss it with my sponsor. And if my sponsor tells me to use this day, that's the day I'll use. If he says no, use the next day, it's only 1 day difference, so it doesn't really make a big deal. But just for your own knowledge, AA uses the first day of permanent sobriety. And when Bill Wilson got sober, he had three or four bottles of beer with him, and he drank them on his way to the town's hospital. When he went to the town's hospital on December 11th, 1934, and he used December 11th as his sobriety date. Even though he had like 4 bottles of beer that morning, that stuff was out of his system sometime during that day, and that's the day he used as his sobriety date. So if it's good enough for Bill Wilson, it's good enough for me. And that's what I'll go along with. All right, now that first part there that's in italics, that's like an introduction to Dr. Bob's story, and I believe that was written by Bill Wilson. And if you notice, it's double spaced afterwards. That's what they do in literature or in books. They double space something to indicate that now you have a new writer or a new speaker. So the rest of this is written by Dr. Bob. All right, I'll read this. It's the second paragraph on page 171. I was born in a small New England village of about 7,000 souls. The general moral standard was, as I recall it, far above the average. No beer or liquor was sold in the neighborhood except at the state liquor agency, where perhaps one might procure a pint if he could convince the agent that he really needed it. Without this proof, the expectant purchaser would be forced to depart empty-handed, with none of what I later came to believe was the great panacea for all human ills. Men who had liquor shipped in from Boston or New York by express were looked upon with great distrust and disfavor by most of the good townspeople. The town was well supplied with churches and schools in which I pursued my early educational activities. So Dr. Bob was born in a village in Vermont, just like Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob both came from Vermont, and it was a small town. That's the name of the town was St. Johnsbury, Vermont, and it was a small town, about 7,000 people. That's not a very big amount of people. That's considered like a small town, at least where I'm from. The 7,000 people is not very big. And in the town that he was in, there was no beer or liquor was sold in the neighborhood, except in the state liquor agency. In Vermont, I don't know if they still do this, but I know years ago, all the liquor stores in Vermont were run by the state. They only had state liquor stores. In fact, I've gone to Vermont. I went on vacation up to Lake George in New York, which is like a tourist area, and it's very close to Vermont. And we went over to Vermont because, we wanted to see what was there. There's tourist stuff in Vermont. And we stopped in the liquor stores there. They have state liquor stores, and the liquor was cheaper in Vermont than it was anywhere else. So we loaded up the trunk with stuff because we got stuff a lot cheaper than it was in New York or New Jersey. And everything is run by the state. Any kind of liquor sales, so the prices are all fixed. It's not like when you have private enterprises in other states where they're private liquor stores. You can have different prices in different liquor stores. All the prices were fixed there, and everything was the same. And they didn't give anybody a hard time about having an excuse for drinking. But back in the day when this was written, I guess they gave people a little bit of a hard time because it's run by the state. The people that were working in the liquor store, they don't really care whether they sell you anything or not because they're employees of the state and they're on a salary and they're getting paid from the state. So they don't care whether they sell you anything or not. The person that has a private store, they want to sell as much as they can because then they make a bigger profit. So the people that were working for the state, they probably didn't even want to sell anything to anybody because they'd have to restock the shelves if they sold stuff. So they probably tried to get rid of people when they came in. So it wasn't that easy to get alcohol back in the day when Dr. Bob was growing up. And he mentions here some of the people had stuff shipped in from Boston to New York, because in Massachusetts or in New York, you could get all the liquor that you want. You don't have to have any trouble. As long as you're 21 years old, you just go into the liquor store and you buy whatever you want, and you could have it shipped in from there, because some places will ship it to you. And that's what people did. Okay, the next paragraph on the bottom paragraph on page 171. My father was a professional man of recognized ability, and both my father and mother were most active in church affairs. Both father and mother were considerably above average intelligence. Dr. Bob's father was a judge, and at certain times he was the state's attorney. He was also a member of the state legislature. He was the superintendent of schools in St. Johnsbury. He was the director of a bank, and he also taught Sunday school. So he was a very active guy, and to be able to do all of that kind of stuff, you have to be very educated. So he was a very educated person. Obviously, he was very intelligent to be able to do that. And Dr. Bob's mother was a teacher, and teachers are highly educated people, and they're considered above average intelligence. So Dr. Bob came from good stock, and we'll see as we go through this that Dr. Bob was a pretty intelligent guy. All right, the first paragraph on 172. Unfortunately for me, I was the only child, which perhaps engendered the selfishness which played such an important part in bringing on my alcoholism. So Dr. Bob, being an only child, he probably, grew up being very selfish because he didn't have any siblings that he had to share stuff with or whatever. And he feels that helped bring on his alcoholism. Because as we know, alcoholics are very selfish people. We may be unselfish in all other things that we do, but when it comes to our alcohol and it comes to our drinking, we get very selfish. That's my booze, get away from it, And that's basically the mindset that he probably had when he was turning into an alcoholic. All right, the next paragraph. From childhood through high school, I was more or less forced to go to church, Sunday school, and evening service, Monday night Christian Endeavor, and sometimes to Wednesday evening prayer meetings. This had the effect of making me resolve that when I was free from parental domination, I would never again darken the doors of a church. This resolution I kept steadfastly for the next 40 years, except when circumstances made it seem unwise to absent myself. So you can see here what happened with Dr. Bob when he was young. He was given an overdose of religious training. He was forced to go to church. He was forced to go to Sunday school, to this Monday night Christian Endeavor. That's an organization for Protestant youth. And sometimes to Wednesday evening prayer meetings. So his parents made him go to all these different religious activities, and he just got sick and tired of it. And he got to the point where he said, when I'm old enough that my parents can't tell me what to do anymore, I'm never going to darken the doors of a church again. And that's pretty much the parallel with Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson had the same mindset. Well, when Bill Wilson was 11 years old, he was in Sunday school, and somebody came around with these pledges, these temperance pledges, that they wanted all the kids to sign that they were never going to drink, and Bill refused to sign it. And he said, I don't know what I'm going to do 10 years from now. I'm not signing a pledge that I'm never going to drink for the rest of my life. Bill didn't drink it. He was only a little kid. He was 11 years old, and his family didn't drink because his grandfather was an alcoholic, and he had stopped drinking, and the family was against drinking. So Bill was raised to stay away from alcohol, and Bill didn't want to drink. He had no desire to drink, but he still wouldn't sign that pledge. He had the defiance that alcoholics have, even when he was a little kid. And they told him he had to sign the pledge, and he said, no, I'm not signing it. And they said, you better sign it or else. And he said, or else my foot. and he got up and he walked out of Sunday school and said, I'm done with this. I'm never coming back here again. I'm finished with your Sunday school. I'm finished with your church. I'm finished with all of this religious stuff. Goodbye. Have a nice life. And he left. And he never wanted to go back to church or anything to do with religion after that. And Dr. Bob didn't want anything to do with church. So you can see the parallel between these two guys. This is probably some of the reasons why they got along so well and everything worked out so good for AA, because these two guys had the same mindset. Okay, after high school came 4 years of one of the best colleges in the country, where drinking seemed to be a major extracurricular activity. Almost everyone seemed to do it. I did it more and more and had lots of fun without much grief, either physical or financial. I seemed to be able to snap back the next morning better than most of my fellow drinkers who were cursed or perhaps blessed with a great deal of morning after nausea. Never once in my life have I had a headache, which fact leads me to believe that I was an alcoholic almost from the start. My whole life seemed to be centered around doing what I wanted to do. Anybody identify with that? That's definitely the alcoholic mind, doing what I wanted to do and not paying any attention to anybody else, right? Without regard for the rights, wishes, or privileges of anyone else. A state of mind which became more and more predominant as the years passed. I was graduated summa cum laude in the eyes of the drinking fraternity, but not in the eyes of the dean. So, well, what he did, he went to college, and when he got to college, they had this, drinking was an extracurricular activity. A lot of people in college, they have all these different kinds of parties and keg parties and things, and he got involved with that stuff, and he did it, and he was into it a lot, and he enjoyed it, and he kept doing it, and he did what he wanted to do. And at the end of this paragraph, it says he was graduated summa cum laude. That's Latin. That means with the highest distinction. Usually people that graduate college and they did good in their academics, they graduate summa cum laude. He got summa cum laude from the drinking fraternity, not from the dean. In other words, the people that he was drinking with said he was doing a really good job at drinking. So Dr. Bob was a pretty heavy hitter right from the beginning. He didn't have to practice drinking or anything. He seemed to have a very large capacity, and he was able to drink a lot more than most people. And what this college was, it was Dartmouth College. That's in Hanover, New Hampshire. And I don't know if it still is, but at the time, that was one of the top colleges in the country. And that's where Dr. Bob went. Okay, the bottom of 172. The next 3 years I spent in Boston, Chicago, and Montreal. Yes?
Well, we go ahead and wrap up there and then kind of close things out and let people open things up for some questions and answers. And we'll just get started back there.
We'll stop here. Okay, we'll pick up here again next week.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll close up and close out and open up for questions like Leo said. All right.
Rob, I guess what we could do is go ahead and do the serenity prayer, and then we'll close that out, if that's all right.
Sounds great. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.